Are you afraid?
I'd taken the seasonal ranger gig out in the Northwoods National Park purely for the isolation. After a rough year, the idea of quiet, endless forest and the rhythm of patrolling trails felt like salvation. My station was a small, two-room cabin, miles from the nearest paved road, reachable only by a gravel track that turned to mud with the first rain and ice with the first snow. It was November, and the first flakes were already starting to fall. My duties were pretty straightforward. Check on the few hardy campers brave enough for late-season visits, clear fallen branches, and report anything unusual. Unusual, in this part of the world, usually meant a bear too close to a campsite or a fallen tree across a hiking path. I was ready for a different kind of quiet. That first week was exactly what I'd signed up for. Cold, crisp air, the silence broken only by the wind in the pines, and the occasional crunch of my boots on frozen ground. I'd check the 3 primitive campgrounds, just clearings with fire rings and pit toilets, and then head back to the cabin, light the wood stove, and read. Then came the nights. Not long after the first proper snowfall, I started hearing it, a sound, faint at first, carried on the wind. It was like a distant, rhythmic chanting, low and guttural, sometimes accompanied by the faint, muffled thud of something heavy being dragged. I tried to dismiss it as the wind, or an animal, but it was too regular, too purposeful. It always started after midnight, and always seemed to come from deeper in the woods, towards the section of the park that was officially closed for the season due to dangerous terrain and an old, unmarked burial ground. Campers weren't allowed within 5 miles of it. One morning, after a particularly clear night had allowed the sound to carry further, I decided to investigate. I took my snowmobile, heading towards the area the sound seemed to emanate from. I found no immediate source, but I did find tracks. Footprints in the fresh snow, far larger than any humans. They were deep, as if the person making them was unnaturally heavy, and spaced widely apart, like someone was taking immense strides. They led further into the closed section of the park, past the faded no-entry signs. I followed them for a mile or so until the snow got too deep for the snowmobile. I tried calling my supervisor, but the satellite phone was dead. I'd forgotten to charge it properly. A cold dread began to settle in my stomach. This wasn't a bear, or the wind. This was something else entirely. Something ancient and wrong. For the next few nights I stayed inside, locking every door and window, keeping my rifle close. The chanting and dragging sounds continued, sometimes closer, sometimes further, but always present. It was a constant, low thrum beneath the silence of the forest. I started rationing my supplies, just in case. One evening, just as twilight began to bleed into night, I saw it. A figure, standing at the edge of the tree line, about a quarter mile from my cabin. It was tall, unnaturally so, and gaunt, even through the bulky ranger uniform it seemed to be wearing. It stood utterly still, just watching. Its uniform was faded and mud-stained, almost blending into the deepening shadows. I couldn't make out many details, but its stance, so rigid and motionless, was deeply unsettling. I kept my breath held, staring back, until the figure slowly, almost imperceptibly, turned and vanished into the trees. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat by the window, rifle across my lap, watching the tree line. The sounds were louder now, closer. The chanting seemed to have more voices, a strange, dissonant chorus that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The dragging sound was clearer, like something heavy being pulled through snow. I tried the phone again the next morning, but it was completely dead. The dread had turned into a cold panic. I was truly alone, and whatever was out there was closing in. I had to get out, but I couldn't just leave someone else to stumble into this. Late that afternoon, I saw a flicker of light from the campground nearest to my station. A camper. My heart sank. They wouldn't know. They wouldn't hear the warnings in the wind or see the unnatural tracks in the snow. They were innocent and walking into a trap. I grabbed my snowmobile keys. I had to warn them, even if it meant risking myself. As I sped towards the campground, the air grew colder and the faint chanting became a deafening drone. And then, there it was, right in my path. The tall, gaunt figure, now in the middle of the clearing. Its mouth was stretched far too wide, revealing multiple rows of small, sharp teeth, rows stacked behind rows inside the mouth. Its eyes are deep, sunken, shadowed hollows that recede into darkness and blend into the deep shadows of its eye sockets, catching no light. I swerved hard, dumping the snowmobile. It was closer to the camp than the cabin, so I started running. The chanting pulsed, an ancient rhythm that seemed to pound in my bones. I could hear other, slower footsteps now, coming from the direction of the woods. A whole procession. I burst into the small clearing of the first campsite. A single tent, a small fire smoldering. I yelled, "Get out! Now!" A young woman, maybe early 20s, emerged, startled and confused. Before she could speak, I grabbed her arm. "Don't ask questions! Run!" I screamed, pushing her towards the snowmobile. "Get on it! Head south! Don't stop!" The chanting was almost on us. I could hear the dragging, the heavy thuds, the distorted breathing. I could just see the first dark, tall figures emerging from the tree line, their forms gaunt and unnaturally tall. I watched her kickstart the machine, the engine roaring to life as she sped away into the night. The relief was immense, but short-lived. I turned, and they were there. 3 of them. All in the same tattered ranger uniforms, all impossibly tall, all with those bottomless void eyes. They moved with a slow, deliberate purpose, forming a semicircle around me. I didn't fight. There was no point. I just closed my eyes, listening to the guttural chanting rise around me, and felt the first cold, heavy hands close around my arms. The dragging sound began again, but this time, I was the one being pulled.